Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 207th session of the online Optom learning series, OOLS. And today we are delighted to welcome back Isha Dave. Isha is a academician, researcher, private practitioner located in Mumbai, India. And she was recently also awarded the Educator of the Year award by International Association of Contact Lens Educators, IACL. She has been into the practice for, I think, over a decade. Isha ma'am, you are into clinical
It's
practice?
15 years.
15 years. So she's been into clinical practice, specializing in contact lenses and dry eye. And recently, with her team, she's also helping the optometric fraternity, by developing what she's going to talk about. I'm not going to steal the thunder, but she's going to talk about digital documentation. And she has developed a particular application, I would say, or a software. And she's also going to take us through the importance of the digital documentation in general, as well as co-management. So welcome back, Isha ma'am, onto our platform. And, let me just leave the screen time to you.
Thank you so much, Fakhruddin. It's an absolute pleasure to be here again and to be speaking to everyone that's attending. And thank you, all the attendees. I appreciate you sacrificing your Sunday evening to listen to me speak. So that is very, very kind. I appreciate that. So what I'm talking about today is not particularly clinical. It's more about practice management and how to be a responsible optometrist and how to responsibly manage your clinical records. We're also going to be talking about the benefits of co-management, and I will spend a little bit of time at the end talking about Asira, which is the software that we have developed. Okay, so let us get started. So we are going to start with a poll. So let's start with the poll. So the question is, do you maintain clinical records in your practice/institute? So always, sometimes, almost never, and never. And I'm getting some really positive responses here, which is great.
Yeah, so we've launched a poll, and
so it'd be really, really useful to know how many people are actually maintaining clinical records.
Yes, I'm just going to leave it on for another 10 seconds.
Sure.
Awesome. And I'm going to share that with you, ending, and there we go. So we have almost, everybody does maintain clinical record. That's 100%. But there are people who always do it, and there are people who does it sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes. Okay. So excellent. So that is really, really great. I'm really happy to hear and see rather that so many people are maintaining clinical records. That's wonderful, because I feel like it's a very, very important aspect of being a good practitioner and following best practice standards. Okay, so let's move on. So here's a few benefits of maintaining good clinical records. So firstly, of course, it is to retain clinical information. So you've spent all this time with your patient, you've done lots of tests, you've had a long conversation with them, you've discussed their outcomes, you've discussed how to move forward, and then the patient goes away, they come back next year, and obviously you have seen maybe 100, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 patients in between this visit and the next visit for the same patient. So nobody expects you to remember what you did for the patient back then. But if you've maintained a good clinical record, you can refer to it, and it's very, very easy for you to then refer back and continue the patient's care. So it's all about continuation. The patient also really, really appreciates it, because then they don't have to explain everything to you again. Also, a lot of people, what they do is they do document clinical information, but then they hand it over to the patient. Now, if your patient is anything like me, and I am absolutely terrible with paperwork, they will not keep the clinical record. I mean, I have been in that situation myself many times where I've gone for x-rays, or I've gone for scans, or I've gone for whatever it is I need to go for. And then 2 years later, I'm turning my whole house upside down, searching for this record because I don't know where I kept it. And that is a very common scenario. And even the most, the most educated, the most intelligent, the most, responsible people can still be scatterbrained when it comes to these kind of things. So if you are to maintain the clinical records for the patient, of course, you should give them a copy as well. But if you're maintaining it for the patient, you're making life much, much easier for them. And they are more likely to come back to you because they don't want to keep explaining themselves again and again. Secondly, it really helps to create a really nice rapport between yourself and the patient, because even small details, things like they play tennis or they play swimming or they just had a baby, all of those things you might record. And then when they come back next year, you've seen it on your clinical record from last year. And you can sort of say, oh, how is your baby doing? She must be quite big now. Or how is your tennis going? Are you still playing? With those kind of things, they really think, even though you don't remember, they think you've remembered, and they really appreciate that because then they feel like you know them as a person. So not just from a clinical perspective, but also from retaining the patient and keeping them coming to you again and again and again. And don't forget, when a patient likes you, they're going to refer other patients to you. They're also going to bring the rest of the family to come and see you. So this might seem like a small thing, but in the long run, this continued clinical management of the patient can really help you grow your practice in the future, and is mutually beneficial both for you and the patient. Of course, we're going to talk about this in much more detail a little bit later on, but when you maintain good clinical records, it's very, very easy to refer to another practitioner because everything is there already. You don't have to get the patient back in. You don't have to ask the patient for clinical records. And if you have a standardized method of record keeping, the other practitioner will also understand everything you've written, and it won't be like a sort of a detective sort of activity to try and decode whatever they've written or whatever you have written. So it's really good to have a very, very structured way to record your clinical records so you can pass them on to other practitioners when you are referring. Okay. Secondly, now this is really, really important. I'm sure all of you know that, and I will keep mentioning this again and again, and I keep talking about this, but it's something I'm very, very proud of as an optometrist in India, that we have recently, in 2021, we have moved from optometry as a profession has moved from allied health to independent healthcare, which is a very, very big deal for us. However, while it's great that we can practice independently, along with that will come a whole array of rules and regulations, which we will have to follow. And they're not going to come in 5 years, 10 years. They're just around the corner. If you're talking to people over at OCI, they will be able to tell you that more stringent regulations are just around the corner. So when you are regulated, there's always the issue of complaints and legal proceedings. Now, this is something that all healthcare practitioners, whether it's doctors, dentists, physiotherapists, pharmacists, optometrists, anyone all over in the West, this is something that they face very, very regularly, where because they are so heavily regulated, and a court proceeding can happen anytime, and you can be held liable for any kind of malpractice or negligence. Now, if you have good clinical records, that is a medico-legal document. So that is what is going to protect you that day in court. Let's hope it never comes. Let's hope nobody is ever taken to court. But for whatever reason, if you are, that medico-legal document is going to protect you, because if you don't have anything in place, then it's the patient's word against yours. So that can make it much more challenging to prove that you did everything correctly. So therefore, it's really useful to maintain good clinical records to protect yourself from legal, if and when there might be a legal proceeding. Beyond that, if you're an academician, or if you like to present your case studies, if you see a lot of interesting cases in your practice and you'd like to present case studies, whether it's at conferences or educators meetings or anything like that, if you have maintained good clinical records, it'll be very, very easy for you to find the case and to reproduce it and to present it. Similar thing is for fellowships and also for retrospective studies. If you want to do a retrospective study on any sort of anything, whether it's myopia, whether it's keratoconus, whether it's diabetic retinopathy, anything you want to do, if you want to do a retrospective study, if you've maintained good clinical records and you've always kept it universal and you kept it standard, then it will be very, very easy for you to run a retrospective study, because most of your records can be included. If you have not maintained good clinical records, you might end up excluding a lot of records from your study. So it's very, very useful for clinical research. Also for clinical audits. Now, people don't really talk about clinical audits, but clinical audits are a very, very useful tool. So I have an ophthalmologist come to my clinic once a month to audit my clinical records. And what that means is that he will pull out maybe 20 random clinical records and just go through them. And he'll go through them to make sure that I correctly treated the patient, that I did everything properly, that I didn't miss out any tests. And if I did, which it happens occasionally, some things can be overlooked, then he will tell me, okay, in this particular case, you should have done this X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. And then the feedback from the audit will really help you to move in the future when you're when you're seeing your patients. It really, really helps. So when you have very good clinical records, it makes it much easier for an outside party to run a clinical audit. So now, how do we document? I keep talking about keep talking about good documentation. So what does that mean? So for those of you who are familiar, there is a format of documentation called SOAP documentation, and it was introduced by Dr. Lawrence Weed in the 50s at Yale University. And that time, the reason this type of documentation was introduced was because they sort of changed their method of treating patients. So while previously, before that, it would be a very sort of the way they treated the patient would be around sort of a very regimented method. So if the patient has X, then the treatment is Y, and that's all. There was no leeway, and there was no way to go right and left, and there was no way to customize it. Whereas after that, when it was sort of changed around a little bit, they introduced something called problem-oriented medical records. And what that means is that it was a much longer conversation with the patient, and then the treatment was based around that individual patient's needs, rather than just a standard treatment that would be given to everybody that has this disease or whatever it is. Okay. So it was proposed as the most efficient way of clinical documentation. Now, it is universally recognized and is a validated method of clinical documentation. So if you are doing so, you probably are already doing it without realizing it. And I will explain what it means in a minute. But the reason it's nice is it's because it's a very systematic approach. So if you're following SOAP documentation, you're unlikely to miss anything, and your flow is very nice, particularly as optometrists. We don't realize that compared to other medical disciplines, we do a lot more in that half an hour to 40 minutes we have with the patient. If you think about it, we do probably 20 tests on the patient as an optometrist, as a primary eye care practitioner. We do about 20, maybe 25 tests, depending on the patient, depending on the day, and we have to document all of that. So a systematic approach really, really helps us. Okay, so what does SOAP stand for? It stands for subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. That was the original SOAP. Now, a lot of people have used E as part of the acronym, making it SOAP, and have included education in that as well, because it is an important part of SOAP documentation and recording cases in the SOAP method. And we'll break those down one by one. Okay, so when we talk about subjective, what are we talking about? Essentially, we are talking about our history taking. So obviously, I'm sure all of you are already doing that. So what does history taking mean? We're talking about chief complaints or symptomatic history, obviously ocular history, systemic history, family history, as well as hobbies and lifestyle. So those are the things that we're talking about when we take histories. Typically, when I take a history, or if I'm teaching my students about history taking, I always talk about the most recent history to the furthest past history. So that's why this is a nice order that I personally like to follow. Other practitioners may have a different approach, but this is a systematic way to do it, to talk about what's going on now, and then what happened in the past. Okay, and then we get to the O, which stands for objective. So again, this is something you must be doing, you are definitely doing in your daily practice, is your tests. So all those 20, 25 tests that you have to do on a patient. So for example, your visual acuity, you're obviously going to measure that on all your patients. You might do a subjective, possibly an objective refraction. You will do some basic binocular vision function. You'll do an anterior posterior segment evaluation, and you might do an IOP measurement, depending on the age of the patient as well. If the practitioners who are practicing in India, if you have been to the OCI website recently, they have a section called Best Practice Standards, which they are trying to implement across the board in India. So we have a universal standard of care in India. This will all be part of competencies that we have to maintain as practicing optometrists in India, if we have to call ourselves optometrists under a regulatory body. And all of these tests are considered very important in best practice standards as a basic comprehensive eye examination. So these are the tests you typically should be doing and documenting for all your patients. Now, when I teach my students, I always say that if it's not documented, it's not done. So a lot of the times what happens is they'll go and do their cases, and they'll come back, and I'll look at their case records, and I'll see that they've not written a few things, whether it's in their history taking, and I'll say, well, why didn't you ask them this? Why didn't you ask them about headaches? Why didn't you ask them about this? And they were like, oh, I did ask, but I forgot to write it. So, but from a medico-legal perspective, if you have not documented it, then you have not done it. So even if you did it and you didn't document it, that can still get you in trouble. So it's very, very important to document everything that you did. Okay, the next bit is called, in the SOAP acronym is A, which stands for assessment, which again, all of you will be doing. So assessment essentially means diagnosis, okay? So like you've done all your tests, you've got all your values, Now, what are you going to do with all these values you have, all this information you've collected for the patients, from the patient? What are you going to do with it? You're not going to just do all the tests, collect all the data and let the patient go. No, you have to make a clinical decision. So you have to sort of assess everything, do an overview, do an analysis, and figure out what your conclusion is. So you based on, and so your assessment would be based on your subjective and your objective findings. And what does that involve? That involves identifying the problems. So, for example, in your history and symptoms, if they said that they're getting headaches, or if they said that they're getting redness or pain, that would be flagged as a problem. Or if you're doing your slit lamp examination and you saw some infiltrates or you saw some staining, or if you're doing your ophthalmoscopy and you saw some dot hemorrhages or blot hemorrhages. So all of these things are abnormalities. All of these things are things that should not be there. So you have identified the problems and you also enlist them. So is there more than one issue? They might not just have the one issue, they might, but if there's more than one issue, you have to list them and then figure out, are all of these issues that they're having, are they all related to each other, or are they all independent to each other? Because that could also be the case. So somebody could have a blot hemorrhage or a dot hemorrhage, which might be connected to their diabetes. And they could also have, some dry eye, which could be connected to contact lens wear. So they might be two independent issues, but both you still have to address. So identifying and enlisting the problems for your assessment section and documenting them carefully. All of these things will help you to reach a diagnosis or carry out a differential diagnosis. And when you document these problems, it will help you also continue to monitor the patient in the future, because when they come back and see you, you can then look at the patient and say, okay, is there an issue? Is this issue still existing, or have I solved the problem? And if the issue still exists, how do I continue? How do I now address this issue, and what do I need a different approach to solving the problem? So when you document, and so you identify and list and document all these issues, the continuous treatment of the patient and the continuous monitoring of the patient is much easier, rather than you having to try and remember what happened last time. Okay. This will also help you reach a diagnosis or a differential diagnosis, something that you must document as well, of course. And if you are referring, so say your next step, which we'll come to in the next slide, but if you are referring and you have properly documented your diagnosis or your differential diagnosis, it makes it much easier for the next practitioner who sees the patient to take the next steps, because you've documented what investigations you've documented what conclusion you've reached, and you've also clearly documented on what did you base this conclusion. So where did this diagnosis come from? It's all been clearly documented. So again, the next practitioner does not need to go back and repeat all of these tests, because you have documented them very nicely. Okay, right. The next bit is the plan. So when we talk, and that's the P in the SOAP acronym. And again, this is something that you will all be doing already, but you may not be documenting it as carefully. But this is probably the most important part of being a healthcare provider. Any healthcare provider is the management. So fine, you've taken the history, you've done the subjective, you've had a chat with the patient, they've told you what the problem is, then you've done all the tests, then you've identified and enlisted the problems, you've figured out, okay, this is the problem. Okay, that's great. But once you've figured out the problem, you have to have a solution. You can't just be like, all right, so I know what your problem is, bye. No, you have to have a solution. You have to sort of tell them what's next. Now, this is probably the most important thing to document, because when you have a plan and you're treating a particular condition or whatever it is, even if you're just fitting a contact lens, when you have a plan, you will always have a follow-up. And when you follow up, when they come back, you want to know what you did previously. Okay. You cannot always rely on the patient to give you an accurate sort of an accurate story of what you had done previously, because they might not be as clear as you. So if you have documented it, then it's much, much clearer. Secondly, say you're in a practice with multiple practitioners. So at my practice, there's two of us. And if the patient comes back on a day where I'm not there and my colleague has to see her or him or them, then we have to, then if I've not documented what I did before, she will have no idea what to do. And it also looks very, very unprofessional if the patient is coming back for a follow-up, and whoever the practitioner is, it's worse if it's the same practitioner, but also if it's a different practitioner, it's not a good look when you have no idea what's going on and you have no idea what's been done before. Whereas if you know exactly what was done before, and you can very smoothly follow up and say, okay, so last time you were here, you were told to do XYZ, you were told to do warm compression, you were told to put in this gel in the morning and the night, you were told to do some blink exercises while you're on a screen. How is all of that going? Have you been doing it, etc., etc.? So that looks much, much more professional, because a patient knows exactly exactly how to continue your treatment. And how do you know all of that stuff? Because you've looked at their previous records, because when they came last time, you had very clearly documented it. Okay. So what do we mean by plan? Well, is there any further testing required? So are you doing any sort of additional tests? Do you need to do a perimetry? Do you need to do a corneal topography? Do you need to do a dry eye evaluation? Do you need to do anything outside an Amsler test? Do you need to do anything outside of your comprehensive eye examination, your standard tests? Okay. Then once you've done the tests again, you'll be able to treat the patient or give therapy or whatever it is, do it yourself, or you might have to refer to a specialist. Now, if the patient needs surgery, you're obviously going to refer to an ophthalmologist. I, for example, don't do any low vision consultations, but if I feel that the patient, and I have no knowledge of low vision personally, so if the patient requires a low vision consultation, then I would refer them to colleagues of mine who practice low vision regularly. So not necessarily an ophthalmologist, maybe another optometrist who is a specialty in their field. I have other optometrists referring patients to me for myopia management or for irregular cornea contact lens fitting. So it can be sort of, referring doesn't necessarily mean to an ophthalmologist. It could also be to another practitioner who has a different speciality from you. Okay. So, but document. So you're going to document exactly who you referred to and what you referred for. So when the patient comes back to you, you can speak to them and say, okay, how did it go with so-and-so? Or if you've documented well, you can, if with the patient's permission, of course, you can directly send your referral note to whoever you're referring to. So the patient doesn't have to worry about carrying paperwork or sort of having, or the other practitioner can have a look at their records before the patient actually comes and be ready with a plan. Okay, right. So finally, we talk about the E. Okay, so E was not in the original SOAP acronym. Sorry. However, I do believe that it is a very, very, very important part of any kind of eye examination, and it's a very important thing to document. And what E stands for education. Okay, and essentially it's counseling. Okay, so what are you advising the patient? Okay. Counseling is a very, very big part of good communication with the patient, and it really, really helps to create a good rapport with the patient. So, when we're talking about counseling, what are we talking about? So, of course, if there is an issue or some eye condition or whatever it might be, you must communicate the details, of course, of the condition to the patient, and they might have a few questions, which of course you would answer, and then the details of further testing or referral. So if you're calling the patient back to do something else, so if you're sending them on, they will ask you why. Why are you sending me on? What can they do that you can't do? Or why do I need to do this test? What is this extra test for? Okay, so these are all discussions to be had with the patient. Then the details of whatever vision correction or treatment or therapy you've given them. Okay, so even if you're just prescribing spectacles, which is the most basic job of an optometrist, even if you're just prescribing spectacles, you're still managing the patient. And again, you will probably be doing this without even knowing that you're doing it. But when you're prescribing spectacles, you're having a discussion with them about progressives or single vision for distance or single vision for near or myopia management spectacles. These are discussions that you're having with the patient, which you should still document, because there is always a chance that the patient comes back and may say, oh, but you didn't tell me about this. If you clearly documented it, then actually that was the discussion we had. So it's very, very important to document all the advice and all the conversation that you've had with the patient. Okay, so even if you've told a patient, so for example, a very good example of this is contact lens care and maintenance, which is a pain point for a lot of practitioners, I think, including myself, because compliance still tends to be such a issue among patients. But of course, responsible practitioners such as yourselves would have given them a very good, detailed way, and probably also given it in some form of writing, some sort of leaflet, some sort of email, something to give them instructions for care and maintenance. Regardless of that, occasionally a patient will not follow your instructions and they may have some sort of contact lens complication. In which case, the last thing you want is a patient to come back and say, but you didn't tell me to do this. Okay. Now, if you have not documented it, then they might be right. Like, will you remember if you told them to do it? But if you've clearly documented that, patient was advised on care and maintenance of contact lenses, and given written instructions, whatever it is, then you have that in front of you. So you know that, no, actually, I did give the instructions. They just didn't follow it. So again, you have protected yourself, and if there's any complaint or anything like that, you are still covered and you're protected. So also, when the patient comes back next time and says, oh, by the way, last time you told me to do this, you told me to do that, if you've documented it, you're able to continue that discussion with the patient, and sort of you'll know exactly what they're talking about. Okay, so really, really important. I think E is a very important part of the SOAP acronym, and I think we should all include that permanently in SOAP, because I think patient education is really, really important. Okay, so let's come to the next poll, please.
All right, so I've launched that poll. This is just to know, how do you maintain clinical records? Is it using the paper method? You write it down always? Is it the digital way using Microsoft Word or Excel, or you use any software, particularly desktop or cloud-based? I skipped the first option because 100% of them do maintain, so I didn't say that, but yeah, that's good.
It's very nice. I love seeing that first section empty, the I don't section empty, which is really, really good.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it on for the next 10 seconds. All right. So I think majority of them are using the writing mode, the paper method, 75%, and the remaining are skewed between the digital way.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of them again are using cloud-based softwares, and a couple of them on desktop and Microsoft Excel or Word. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. That's really, really good to know. And I'm really, really happy that everybody is maintaining clinical records, which is very, very nice. Okay. So, right, so let's talk a little bit about going digital now. So a lot of you, and I'm really happy to be here because I see a lot of you are using paper records, and I just want to talk to you, and I'm sure those people who are using digital records, whichever one it is, will be seeing the massive advantages of doing digital documentation and using EMR. So EMR stands for electronic medical records. Okay. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the challenges of the modern eye care practice, particularly when you are using paper records. And I know this because I have faced this myself. So if I give you just a little snippet of background, so the practice that I work in right now, my mother opened that practice. My parents actually opened that practice many years ago, 1987, I believe. And I'm not going to tell you how old I was then. So, but you can imagine how long the practice has been open. And of course, back then they only had paper. They only had paper to record all of their clinical records. So over the last, 30 odd years, you can imagine how many clinical records, how many paper records have sort of piled up. Now, I also live in Bombay, in Mumbai, which is, for those of you who are from here or ever visited, you will know that we have a lot of people in very little space. So everything tends to be smaller, kind of like Japan. Everything's smaller, everything's more concise. And so it's similarly in my practice, in terms of the actual size, I mean, square footage is not very big at all. And I don't really have space just for like so many years worth of storing records and so many filing cabinets. And as you know, you have to store records for 7 years. So I've ended up taking boxes and boxes of archived records home and storing them in my house because I no longer have space to store them in my clinic. And that's when I thought, I need to do something about this, and I need to sort of think about moving in a different direction and finding a better way to store clinical records. So you tend to spend, then of course there are other challenges. Storage is just one of the challenges. So what are the other challenges? Of course, we are managing accounts, managing inventory, we are ordering. And right now, the way we order spectacles and order contact lenses is so chaotic because it's either WhatsApp or we're doing it over the phone, and there's so many mistakes being made. And I'm sure so many of you can relate. If I could see you, I guarantee you I'd see a lot of you going, yes, that is an issue. And of course, managing appointments. If you have one or two appointment books and people are calling and you have sort of a busy practice and you have that one appointment book that you have to keep going back to, it can get very, very challenging, especially if a patient calls you at 10 o'clock at night asking for an appointment tomorrow morning and you have no idea what you have, and you're not going to carry your appointment book with you everywhere you go. So, and there might be multiple practitioners in your practice and they all have their own calendars. So managing appointments can be quite tricky as well. You end up spending lots of time. And I know before I sort of shifted over to a digital platform, after my day was finished, I would be there for at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half afterwards, after I finished seeing on my patient, just doing administrative work, either filling in records or filing or searching for the records from the following day or writing out orders. So all of this stuff was really, really time consuming, and time is precious. I would love to go home an hour earlier. So so what are the other things? Like I said, searching for physical records. Now, this is a common problem in my practice, not just here, but even when I used to work back in the UK and we were doing everything on paper, you'd end up spending so much time searching for physical records or filing, putting them away. And if you were busy, you'd end up with piles and piles and piles of filing to do. And then you have to put aside sort of 2-3 hours just to sit and file everything, which can be very, very annoying. Then the second thing is, it's all privileged information. It's all private information. And you have to store it securely. So you have to be able to lock your filing cabinet. Then there's the question of who has access to it. Anybody can pull out a physical record and take it home. Anybody can sort of open it, look at it, take it, whether it's your staff, whether it's, any stranger walking into your practice, if your filing cabinet is left unsupervised. Data is a currency these days. So data is very, very precious. Then, of course, managing prescriptions and reports that you would be giving to patients. That's also a pain if you have to sit and write them, or if you have to sit and make Word documents. These after the patient is gone, that will take up a huge amount of time. Your patient asks for a report of everything that you've done. The actual process of writing clinical records. Just recently, I had a family member send me, she was in another city, and she sent me she went for an eye examination. She had some issue, and she sent me a photograph of a report that was given to her by her ophthalmologist. And this is a true story. I remember sitting with 3 of my colleagues at Lotus, where I teach, and the 4 of us sat together and we were looking at this photo, and we spent at least 20 minutes trying to decode as a team effort what this ophthalmologist has written, because we had no idea written. And even my colleague who works for me, sometimes she'll write or I'll write something and I won't be there, and she'll look at the record and she'll be like, I have no idea what you've written, or vice versa. So handwriting can be big, and we do need to write quickly. Then the biggest nightmare for me is the lost record. We are so dependent on these clinical records. So when they get lost, it can be an absolute nightmare. And these are all issues that we face with keeping paper records. Okay. So what is happening now? So what is going on in India now? So I already mentioned the NAHCP Act, which was passed in March 2021, and we are now independent healthcare practitioners. So this is a very serious, very exciting, but very serious change in legislation. So we will be held accountable for our patients. Now, previously, we came under allied health. And as you all know, allied health means we are working under the supervision of a registered medical practitioner. Okay. So essentially what that means is we didn't have to worry so much because we weren't really responsible. If anything went wrong with the patient, it was the person who was in charge, the registered practitioner, the doctor, the ophthalmologist, whoever it was, that's the person that was held responsible. That is no longer the case. Now, as independent healthcare practitioners, if something goes wrong, it is completely on us. We are held responsible, we are held accountable because we are independent, because we are practicing independently. So when we have a digital system of storing records, it makes it much, much easier to maintain those records, even if you have a small space. And the security is much better, and there's lots and lots of advantages, making it much easier for practitioners today to maintain clinical records without opting for paper. Okay, and what I have found in the last sort of 13 years that I've been practicing in India is that the optometrists here are much, much more clinically inclined. I just get approached by so many people asking to intern at my practice or asking to, learn more skills, learn better skills. How do I do this? How do I grow my practice? How can I specialize in this? And that's really, really nice. I mean, it's really nice to see so much ambition in optometrists today, rather than them just saying, yep, I'll just sit and do basic refractions and sell spectacles. So it's really, really nice to see. The other thing I'm seeing is that the next generation, so such as myself, and even, the younger ones now, who are taking over from their parents' businesses, and their parents may have been sort of opticians, but the younger ones who have got their B Optoms, who have got their M Optoms, they want to really enhance their practices. They want to kit them out, buy new equipment, and start doing more clinical practice, which is really nice. But the more clinical you go, the more documentation there is. So digital documentation is really, really useful for that. Okay, so where are we globally? Okay. If we look at the West, they mostly do digital documentation. Okay. So now I would just want to draw your attention to this graph where I've got something called practice management software. And then I've got something PMS, and then I've got something called EMR, which is electronic medical records. So practice management is basically how you're managing your patients and your appointments and the administrative side of things. Okay. So a lot of people, and the administrative side of things is a pain, that's a massive, massive pain point. And there are lots of generic softwares that will help you with practice management. So a lot of people have adopted that, which is great. It makes your life so much easier and makes everything much, much more efficient. Okay. So 99%, so that's almost 100% of practitioners, of eye care practitioners, use computers or tablets in their consulting room. Of course, who doesn't own a laptop or a tablet or even a phone? Okay. Then 80% of them are using practice management software. So to manage all the appointments and the admin related stuff, the orders, etc., etc. Only 50% are using electronic medical records, and only 10% are completely paperless. Okay. Completely paperless is where we would all like to be. That is at least what I'm aiming for in my practice. And it would make life so much easier if we could go completely paperless. And it would be better for the environment as well. But 50% globally are using electronic medical records. This was taken from an article published maybe 5 or 7 years ago. So this might have changed now, that 50% might have increased to maybe 55 or 60% by now. I don't know. I would have to research that further. Having said that, 50%. Beyond this, we did a survey as well within India, and actually the numbers matched as well. So 50% of eye care practitioners in India are also using some sort of electronic documentation, not necessarily EMR, but whether it's the things that I mentioned before, possibly a Microsoft Excel or a Microsoft Word, but but essentially they're not using paper. But that is still only 50%. So that means the other 50%, which obviously doesn't include a lot of you, are either not, the other 50% who are not documenting at all, which doesn't include anyone here, are either not documenting, or, like a lot of you here, are using paper. Okay. And 10% are completely paperless. Okay. So what are the benefits of going digital? Well, first of all, it saves you a lot of time. So that time that you spend on filing, on writing orders, writing prescriptions, making reports, all the rest of that, you can use it much, much better. So now I have taken that time that I used to spend, and I've actually transferred it to increasing my social media presence. And social media is an amazing marketing tool, and that's a whole different lecture. But that's actually something, because I no longer have to do all this filing and all this paperwork, I can actually spend that time, me and my Optom, both of us, can spend more time on social media, spend more time on other activities. Life is, don't forget, guys, life is not only optometry. There are so many other fun things you can do in life. Attend dance classes, do yoga, go to the gym, play football, whatever it is. So if you can leave the clinic 1 hour early, that gives you an extra hour a day to do whatever else you want. Of course, it saves space. I don't have to worry about filing cabinets and where am I going to put the records of all these new patients that keep coming. The best thing is I can access the records from anywhere. So I will give you an example. As you all might know, I very recently attended the IACL World Conference and the BCLA as well. And I remember I was sitting at the BCLA. I was attending a lecture and my phone dinged, and it was a patient of mine asking about something XYZ. And I'd seen this patient shortly before I had come to the UK. And of course, I had no idea, I couldn't remember anything. But all I did was open my laptop, sitting right there in that lecture. I opened my laptop, opened my software, accessed their record, and I could answer their question straight away. And they were so happy. So that is the difference. Now, imagine if I didn't have that, I would have been like, oh, let me get back to you, then message my Optom in India, then have her wait while she finishes seeing her patients for the day, then goes and finds that patient's record, then calls me back, then tells me this. So can you see how much time I saved? And then, of course, there's the time difference. Then she can't reach me. Then I can't reach her. Then I have to reach the patient. So I've saved a whole day. Like what previously spent a whole day on, I did it in 5 minutes. So this was a big, big sort of eureka moment for me. Of course, no more lost records, which is great. Lost records are a nightmare. This example I gave you just shows how it improves inter-practitioner communication. So, patient-practitioner communication. So I was able to communicate with the patient much better, and also improves inter-practitioner commitment. I no longer have to sit and explain to my opthal what the patient is, what I found, this, that, blah, blah, blah. All I have to do is send them a WhatsApp saying, I'm sending you a patient, and on WhatsApp itself, I attach the report that I downloaded from my software, and that's it. And the patient is gone, and I don't have to worry about anything else. Similarly, the same report, there and then I will WhatsApp to my patient. So the patient has a report, the ophthalmologist has the report, I can move on with my day. I don't have to think, okay, wait, now I have to spend half an hour preparing a report so they can give it to the ophthalmologist. Then I have to call the ophthalmologist. None of that. Okay, so this automatic generation of the report that happens instantly has made my life so much easier when it comes to referrals. Safe and secure. Safe and secure is a big one. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. A lot of these practice management software also help with inventory management, which is very, very useful for those people who have opticians attached to their practice or within their practice, because you have to keep a large inventory of frames. I don't really do much spectacles, so that doesn't really affect me so much. But for those who do, it is very, very useful. And I think most of you would already be using some sort of practice management software to manage your inventory. Automation of spectacle and contact lens orders, that's really useful. Again, same thing now. I don't have to call or speak to anyone, which is amazing. I just WhatsApp an order that I've downloaded straight from my software, which has a patient's name, which has everything on it. I just directly send that to my distributor, and I don't have to worry about anything else. It's just no WhatsApp messages, nobody making mistakes while they're typing, none of that. Automation of patient reminders and recall. So everybody's on WhatsApp now. So WhatsApp integration is a big one. So if a software provides this for the patient, for you guys, where the patient gets a reminder automatically without you having to think about it, that will save you a lot of time. So again, we would spend half our day sitting and sending reminders to the patients. And then we had paper records. So we had to create a system where we would go through each paper record and see who's been reminded, who's not reminded. With an automated system, you don't even have to think about it. It goes. This is also for like reminders for appointments, when they're booking appointments, confirmation. You can also use this to notify patients that their spectacles or their contact lenses are ready. So it saves a lot of time. And of course, billing. Billing is a big one. So whether you're billing for your spectacles, your contact lenses, your solutions, or your consultation fees, please, everybody charge consultation fees. So, so important. Again, that's a whole different lecture, but your consultation fees, it becomes much, much easier rather than you having to sit and write a bill or sit and type a bill. Because some of these patients will ask for GST invoices. And I remember before we were using any software, we had a template, and we'd have to sit and fill in the template and calculate all the GST and do all of that for you. A software will do all of that ourselves. A software will do it for you. So it makes things very easy. So why do people not do it? Like, I've spent the last 20 minutes talking about why software is amazing. It should be a no-brainer, right? But still, we have 50% of people who have not adopted digital documentation or some kind of software. Number one is the cost, and it is true. It can be expensive. Okay, so it can be expensive. So the key to that, and we will discuss how we can go around a lot of these things, but it is important to remember that while you are spending in one place, you are saving in another place. And it is also the question of time versus money. Okay, so for me personally, and I think a lot of you will agree, time is much, much more valuable. So I am happy to pay for anything that saves me time, anything that gives me even an extra hour in the day and that will make my life easier. That'll give me peace of mind, because working 12 hours a day is very, very hard. And it would be really nice to have sort of 1 hour to spend with your family, with your friends, in my case, with my dogs. So it's a really, really nice thing to consider if something is costing you, but is saving you time. This one's a big one. And in our research, we have come across a lot of people, especially if they're slightly older and sort of set in their ways, unfamiliarity with technology. So sometimes a lot of these softwares have a very steep learning curve. They're quite complicated, and they require somebody to sit and train them on how to use a software. So now you end up, the whole point of the software was to save you time, but this ends up being a little counterproductive, because now you're spending more time figuring out how to use the software. Okay, so some of them are very complicated, and the learning curve can be a problem. Then, of course, there's the heavy reliance on hand-drawn figures. Now, I still love hand-drawn figures, okay? Hand-drawn figures are the quickest, easiest way. I mean, I know we can all take photographs, this, that, blah, blah, blah. But if you've been practicing as long as I have, you will appreciate drawing, being able to draw, being able to label, being able to do that very, very easily, okay? So hand-drawn figures is a big one. Then, of course, there's lack of access to information. I remember I was searching for something and I had the hardest time finding something, let alone, choosing one. It was very, very difficult to find one because they hide. They don't tell you that they're there. They don't make themselves available. So people just don't know about it. And when we carried out our survey and we asked people, why don't you use digital? We asked those people who don't use it, why they don't use digital documentation. A lot of the response was, it just didn't really occur to us. And it didn't really occur to them because they didn't know that this was out there, that this was available to them. And then, of course, the last one is a really important one. Again, is uncertainty about the security of your data, of your information that you're storing, because you're storing patients' privileged private information. So how do I know that it's secure? So let's talk a little bit about what to expect from your software. Okay, so what should you expect? So first of all, in terms of cost, they need to be flexible. Okay, so your software must be flexible and ensure that they have a unique pricing strategy which covers everyone, whether you're just a single independent practitioner or whether you're a very, very large multiple. Okay, so or somewhere in between. It has to have very unique and flexible pricing to help with all of that. Now, when it comes to unfamiliarity with technology, first of all, it's important that, of course, for optometry, as I mentioned, we do about 20 to 25 tests. Okay, so a lot of the time, just a very sort of generic software will not really work. So we need to do something that is a bit more specific for us. So it's very important that it is designed by practitioners who are practicing every day. And secondly, if it's a good design and if it offers a good user experience with easy navigation, it's not that difficult to learn. The best example I like to give people is nobody taught you how to use Facebook or Instagram, but you are all using it. But nobody sat and trained you how to use it, because Facebook and Instagram have such amazing UIs, which is user interfaces, and user experiences, which is all in the design, that you don't have to learn. You can teach yourself. And that's what you should expect from your EMR or practice management software. For drawing tools, there should be drawing tools that are customized for eye care. Because again, something generic is just not going to work. It has to be very, very customized to save us time. Otherwise, we end up spending just more time. Okay, so they have to be templates and drawing tools where we can produce clinical diagrams easily without having to do a whole paintbrush experiment. With lack of access to information, they should be available. You should be able to reach out to them. They should have a good social media presence. They should have a blog. They should have a website. So all of these things are ways where you can find an appropriate software. Now, when we talk about uncertainty about security, so compliance is a huge thing. Okay, so if your software is compliant, look for HIPAA, HL7, SOX 2, GDPR. All of these things are indication that your software is compliant. So that means it's highly secure. Cloud-based is probably the most secure out of all of them, because a desktop can be hacked. It's quite easy to hack a desktop. Paper records can just be taken. Desktops can be hacked, and they can have a virus. They can get a virus. So that's also a big challenge with desktops. And any updates that need to be done on a desktop requires an engineer, which can be quite painful. Also, if it's a desktop, you are kind of limited to that one place. So cloud-based, whereas with clouds, depending on which cloud they're using, but clouds are very, very secure, very difficult to hack. And you'll find that the most compliance international softwares are cloud-based. Of course, and on cloud-based softwares, the encryption, the databases are completely encrypted end to end. So it's very, very difficult for anybody to get into that data. Also, a good software will give you role-based protocols. So just not from an authentication perspective, so not just from who can sign into the software, but also who can have access to what areas of the software. So, for example, within your practice, if you may not want your receptionist to look at all your clinical records, so you can cut off that access. That becomes very difficult with paper records or even with desktop softwares to put all those protocols in. So you can then establish permission control. It'll be nice if it followed SOAP guidelines to make it much easier for you, and again, customized for eye care practitioners, not just a generic software. Otherwise, it will you'll end up spending more time than saving time, because you'll end up just typing instead of writing, which kind of defeats the purpose. Okay, let's take the next poll as we move on to the next topic.
Great, I've launched that. This is just to know the idea about co-management. So do you really do co-management regularly, or you're afraid of losing your patients to another practitioners? You want to do it, but you don't know how, or probably you're not aware of, what does co-management mean? Okay, so just keeping it on for another 10 seconds. This is kind of a mixed response, I would say, in this one.
I like the honesty.
Okay, there we go. So I'm just sharing the results with you. About 20 odd percent are probably not completely aware, I would say, of co-management. Almost half of them kind of do that regularly.
Which is great.
30% of them would like to do, but don't know how, where to start. And I think somebody is also afraid of losing patients to another practitioner as well. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about co-management. So why is it? Well, first of all, it's really important to stay within what do we mean by co-management? For example, we're talking about working together with a practitioner, another practitioner, another healthcare practitioner. It doesn't have to be eye care, it can be anybody, to manage the same patient. Okay, that essentially what co-management means. Okay, for those of you who didn't really understand what it means. So why do we do it? Number one, to stay within the scope of your practice. So if there is something that you have as a practitioner that you are good at, and there might be other things that you're not so trained in, or you're not so well versed in, or you don't have the experience in, but you know somebody who does, it's really, really good to work with that person to manage the patient. Helps you build relationships within not just the eye care, but also the healthcare community. And it creates credibility as a practitioner, because patients, they appreciate transparency. Because if you say, look, this is not really my expertise, but I will refer you to someone who does know more about this, they really appreciate that, because I'm good at what I do, which everybody should have that confidence. If you're a good practitioner, you should know that I'm really good at what I do. My patients love me, and they're not going to go anywhere else for their normal eye exams. This particular thing, that's not my area of expertise, so I'm going to refer them on. Okay. And also cross referrals is a big, big thing. When you co-manage, the person you are sending your patients to will also send patients back to you, which can be very, very beneficial for both of you. Okay, so what are we talking about when we talk about co-management? So for example, we're talking about referring to an ophthalmologist. Okay, when would be if they need surgical intervention? Okay, so if they require any surgery, you can't, as optometrists, there's nothing we can do about that. We're just going to send them off. Okay. Any aggressive medical treatment, so whether it's glaucoma, microbial keratitis, these are things that we don't want to deal with. Plus, we don't have, it's not within our scope of practice to manage these conditions. So always, always better to refer. Any kind of systemic or neurological intervention, so whether it's diabetes, hypertension, whether it's a papilledema or a suspicious visual field loss, that could be neurological. These are kind of things that really you can't do anything about. It either has to go to a general practitioner or an ophthalmologist or even a neurologist. And of course, any kind of specialty services. Now, this may not necessarily be a medical practitioner. It may be another eye care practitioner or optometrist, but who is specializing in these particular things, so specialty contact lenses or vision therapy, myopia management, or like low vision is somebody I refer a lot of patients to other colleagues for low vision services. Okay, so whom? So for example, who do we refer to? So we started with the how. Let's go back. We started with the why. And now what are we referring? Now, who are we referring to? So we will start. So if there's any eye-related issue, anything eye-related, which is outside your scope of practice, you're referring to an ophthalmologist. Of course, if it's anything systemic, so you suspect there's high blood pressure, you suspect diabetes is out of control, you're referring to a GP or an endocrinologist. You could also refer to a neurologist if you suspect any kind of neurology-related issues. A pediatrician if your child is sort of not looking 100%. And when I say your child, I mean your child patients. And your specialized optometrists or specialty clinics, if that's something that you don't do within your clinic, or maybe you don't have the equipment to do it. When do we refer? So when we refer, like when do we want, when I say when do we want the patient seen? So how do we decide that? Like when, and this is a very key thing. So how urgently does the patient need to be seen? So we take two things: that how sight or life threatening is there? Are they going to go blind or are they going to die? And secondly, what level of discomfort are they in? Okay. So if it's sight or life threatening, or the patient is in extreme discomfort, like vomiting, that kind of pain, then you're going to do an emergency referral, which would be within 24 hours. If it is sight threatening, there's a significant level of discomfort, but they are managing, they can probably do it within a week. If it's not too bad in terms of sight threatening, like they're not going to go blind tomorrow, and it's a moderate level of discomfort, again, they can bear it within 2 weeks, which would be a rapid referral. Then you have a routine referral where there's no imminent danger. Okay, so they're fine. Nothing's good, like a cataract surgery, for example, they're fine. Well, and there's a mild level of discomfort. So with a cataract surgery, they're not very that uncomfortable. They might have slightly blurry vision. So that would be between 1 to 3 months. So you can decide on how soon you want to refer based on the condition. How do you refer? So you want to create a document, whether it's from a software, whether it's a written document with all the patient's name, demographic details, everything that you've done. So essentially create a document with your full SOAP documentation, and you want to give a provisional diagnosis. I suspect that this is the problem, and a short note for the practitioner, like, dear Dr. So-and-so, this is what I would like to, please check. This is what I have seen. This is what I think. Please advise, etc., blah, 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 blah. Okay, so a short note for the practitioner you're referring to is very nice. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate the one case that I did. It's a real case. However, I've changed the name, obviously, for data protection purposes. But it is a real case that I did just a few days ago, just to demonstrate how I do the SOAP documentation and how I refer my patients. Okay. Okay, so here's me signing into my software. And you can see that I have my own personal username and password. This is a really nice thing about a cloud-based software. And then I will book an appointment. I think I already booked an appointment in this particular situation. Yep, you've got a pre-booked. Now, notice there's a box to tick for consent. It is really, really important you always take consent from your patient. So the patient came in because they had some symptoms. So I took a very, very detailed history of what symptoms they had. So they had reduced vision for distance in the right eye since the last month, and it was pretty bad. It was all the time. And also for near. And they also had some headaches. And again, took some detailed history about the headaches since when. So all of these three things, I'm already making a mental note that all of these three things, as I'm documenting, are seem to be connected. Also some burning in both eyes, but that's been happening for a little bit longer, for 6 months. It's not there all the time, it comes and goes, but when it's there, it's sort of moderate. Also some watering in both eyes, again, similar sort of time, 6 months. And again, it comes and goes, but when it's there, it sort of waters quite a lot. So I asked them a little bit about ocular history. Now, this is a patient I also know from before. So they had an infection when they were a child. So it was a corneal infection. I couldn't put the date in because I didn't have a date. Same thing with the dry eyes. I couldn't put the date in because I didn't have a date, but they didn't tell me an exact date. They were like some time back. So not really sure about that. But as you can see in the remarks, the patient had an infection as a child and unsure of the details. So this was a patient that was treated as a child and he was living in a village at the time. So he didn't really have any details. So that's the best I could do, which is fine. Since he's also got diabetes, type 2 diabetes, he doesn't know how since when it was, so I couldn't put a date in there. So you put in as much as in information as you can. And he told me he's using some eye drops for the dry eyes, and he's also using some tablets for the diabetes, and he did not know any of the names of these things. And he also, sorry, I'm glad I'm writing it down, see, because I forgot. He did say he hardly ever uses the eye drops. Okay, so he was not aware, actually, of any family ocular history or family systemic history. I started using the software. I had to enter this from the paper record I had from last year. And this is what was recorded. So at that time, his visual acuity was 612 with the prescription that I'm entering now. So as you can see, he has a decent amount of cyl in both eyes, and that's probably attributed a little bit to the corneal infection he had as a child, whenever it was. So obviously it was around 6 months ago, a little bit more that I saw him. And he doesn't wear contact lenses, and he's a cook. That is his profession, and he likes to read and watch TV. So obviously these are visually demanding tasks. So it was really disturbing for him when he couldn't see properly. So I tested his visual acuity. His aided vision was 624 with his current spectacles, but the pinhole was improving to 612, as you can see. And his near vision was still N12. His distance vision wasn't terrible in the left eye. It was okay, but he didn't really have any complaints for the left eye. So I performed a subjective refraction only. It was a little difficult for me to do the objective refraction undilated because I couldn't see the reflex that well because there was some corneal scarring, which I'll show you in a minute later on. So as you can see, the cyl has increased substantially. It's gone from -8 to a -12, but the acuity has improved. He went from a 624 to a 612. So that has made a difference for sure. And his slight difference in his left eye, and it's increasing his acuity a little bit as well. Okay. I wanted to know if he was suppressing because there's quite a big difference between the right eye and the left eye, but he wasn't suppressing. I did a basic binocular vision test, and I found a very small exophoria, about 10 diopters. Full disclosure, I didn't actually measure it. I just estimated it would be about 10 diopters, but I wasn't going to do anything about it anyway because the control was very good. near point of convergence was fine. I do these basic tests on most patients. The ocular motility was also pretty good, and he had no pupil issues at all. Okay. So I moved on to doing a slit lamp evaluation to see if there was any issues. So lids and lashes were fine. So I had a look at his cornea, and there were some issues with the cornea. So I'm just documenting everything that I saw. My observations, which I didn't really need to, but I like to make a few extra comments just to remind myself of what was happening. And then I like my diagram, so I drew. My drawing skills are not great, but I was able to at least draw something that when I look at next time, I will be able to see. So black represents scar tissue. So that at least on my software, all the colors are validated. So green obviously represents staining, black represents scar tissue, orange represents inflammation, and red represents blood or congestion. Okay, I actually do enjoy playing around with the drawing tools. It's quite fun. And so there I can put on some. So these, as you can see, these buttons are nicely sort of customized specifically for anterior seg conditions. I did dilate him, look at his retina, and I just wanted to check that there wasn't any cataract, which there wasn't. He was quite young anyway, so I wasn't expecting to see any cataract. However, he did have diabetes, so I just wanted to double check that. So which is why I also had a look at his retina, but everything was absolutely fine. No sign of glaucoma either. Optic nerve head looked good. So no diabetic retinopathy. And the peripheral retina also looked good. I did a quick tear film evaluation because he was complaining of burning and watering, which I generally associate with dry eyes. And I did find that all the results were a little bit less. And I just did a pressure test. I have both contact and non-contact because his cornea was a little uneven. I used the non-contact tonometer. I also did a corneal topography, which I had the option of uploading, but when I was making this video, I couldn't immediately find the file, so I didn't want to waste time. Finally, this is my last section, my assessment plan and counseling education section. So as you can see, history and symptoms, we had our initial subjective, then we did all our objective with the tests, and now I'm telling him to use some lubricants for his dry eyes. And I had a quick conversation with him regarding what to do next, because now his power the cyl in his left eye had increased so much that it would be very difficult and very expensive to make spectacles. Plus, I was a little bit concerned about binocular vision issues with the two vastly different powers. So I suggested rigid contact lenses because that might help him. And obviously, it will help him see a lot clearer as well and give him good balanced vision. He does have stereopsis. He does have, he is using both eyes. He's not suppressing. So therefore, I thought it would be a good idea to put him in contact lenses. However, he said, is there any surgical option? And honestly, for that, I said, I don't know. So, and I didn't know the answer to that because essentially he's got these corneal scars in the middle, where I showed you on the diagram, but I don't know if he is suitable for a graft or a transplant or any kind of corneal surgery. So therefore, in this case, I still referred him to Dr. Agarwal, who is a corneal surgeon that I send a lot of my patients to, and she also sends a lot of patients to me for contact lenses for irregular cornea. So this is a really, really good example of co-management. And so I wrote, as you can see in the remarks, I wrote a little message for Dr. Agarwal to explain what I have found, and told her what my recommendations are. I've communicated everything, documented everything. So I even remember what conversation I had with the patient, which is very, very useful because when he comes back in 6 months, I'm not going to remember any of this. And I'm not even going to remember that I sent him to Dr. Agarwal, but I have it saved on my EMR software, so I don't have to worry about remembering. It's all there. And I even remember the conversation I had with Dr. Agarwal. So this is something that I do regularly. Now this entire note, so I just entered a few more details in his prescription, just measured his PD and added the back vertex distance in case he did decide to make spectacles, which I did not recommend for his power. And then the discharge summary. So this is what I then finally gave to the patient and also gave to send across to the ophthalmologist so she can see everything that I've done, all the tests that I've done, and she can then make a decision on what to do next. And you can see the little note at the bottom there. So this I downloaded and just WhatsApped it to the ophthalmologist. Okay, so that was a little case study showing you how I use EMR to do my referrals. And of course, there's a lot more I can show you with my EMR, but that's for another day. Again, I only showed you one case study, but it's just a good example of how to responsibly document. So as you can see, even when things were normal, I still documented it. If you remember in my posterior segment section, I wanted to have a really good look at the posterior segment because his visual acuity was low, because he was diabetic. I wanted to make sure I had a really good look at it, which I did, and I documented everything. So tomorrow, if he ends up with any kind of complication, I can tell you that it wasn't there when I saw the patient because I've documented it clearly. So this is just a little quote that I've got from the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology, which I really like, talking about EMR and how it really can improve eye care in this country. So I'm just going to leave you with that last note, and I hope you found this talk enlightening and useful. If you want to know more about the software, please contact me. For everybody who attended, we will offer discounts and things like that if you just quote OOL when you talk to me. So feel free to take a photograph or a screenshot of our contact details. And I know we're short on time, so Fakhruddin, we can call it a day if you like, and people can just email me or talk to me email me or message me or call me with questions.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you so much, Isha ma'am, for that, comprehensive talk and letting us know what possibilities we have with the software as well. I mean, I was fascinated to see you clicking here and there. And some of the things when you are in the clinic with the patient, you might just forget. But the software kind of reminds you and keeps you on check as well, I guess, so that you don't miss
Yeah,
a
correct.
consultation.
And the key is that it's designed, you can tell that it is designed by eye care practitioners because it is very, very customized for us. Like that's the whole point, because the generic ones, like I said, can end up wasting more time.
Right. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think definitely, as you said, there are too many things to explore. We can always, arrange another one as we were discussing offline as well to have that demo and things like that.
Yeah.
So we can always do that. But I'm sure, I think if we go to the website, there are a couple of videos which people could see and get to know the software
It'll give you an overview of
overview.
like
Yeah.
what it covers and what we have. The website has a little bit of information, but the best thing to do is get in touch with me or my team. I mean, I've put my details there, but you can get in touch with I can put you in touch with people on my team as well. And we can do a longer demo. There's a lot more to show. I only showed a snippet of what is there. And there's a lot more coming also.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, great. So I think we'll wait for all the updates. But even looking at this, whatever version, I think this would not be the first version what you're showing us. This would be
It's like,
probably
yeah, I can't even.
yeah. So it's already looking so great, and as you are saying, there are too many
Thank you.
things coming up. So that would be something very beneficial for the optometric fraternity, not only in India, but I think a lot of us overseas and all of that
For
could also
sure,
benefit.
definitely. Like I said, because it's cloud-based anywhere in
You
the
can
world.
use it anywhere, right?
It's very, very easy. I don't even have to come there. I mean,
Awesome, great. So I think thank you so much, for sharing that with us, not only of the software but also the clinical, knowledge which you have given us as a background. So that is really important. So we need to start with that knowledge and apply it using the software based, so making life easy. So thank you so much for sparing your Sunday. Even if you have any questions, you can either reach out to us and we'll connect you to Isha ma'am and the team, or you can directly Google Asira and get in touch with them as well. So
get in touch, and my number and my email address is there as well. So feel free to WhatsApp, email, visit the website, visit the blog. We're also on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. So you can just look for us and find us. And if you do reach out to me or to anyone in my team, please do mention that you had attended an OOLS lecture so we can give you, so you can take advantages of the discounts we're offering for people who attended OOLS.
Okay, thank you so much for that as well. So to the attendees, we do have session planned over the next couple of weekends. Until then, take care, be safe, and hope to see you during the next session. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Take care. Bye.